What's up, everybody? Welcome to my YouTube channel, Curious World of I, who is I, me, Leon, just here sharing my self-discovery journey with others through spirituality, mindset, storytelling, travel, and much more. Now, for today's video, is going to be a bit more of a free-flowing video, because typically when I do these videos around specific topics that I feel require a bit more vulnerability, I don't necessarily like to write down kind of outlines or points as I typically do with most of my videos to, of course, allow that vulnerability to come through, as well as to make them as authentic as possible. And for today's video, the topic is around men's mental health. Now, we are in the month of November, which is a month that highlights men's health and mental health in general, but as I'm recording this video, we're almost done with November, and I do believe that this topic should go far beyond just 1 month, because it's very easy to Google the statistics around men's mental health, and when you do, it's very clear. Like, for example, the first website that pops up is mindwise.org that has stats around men's mental health, which is, 1 in 10 men experience some form of depression or anxiety, but less than half seek treatment. Men die of suicide 3.88 times more than women, and I think there's a statistic out there that says 75% of world suicides are men. About 6 out of every 10 men experience at least one trauma in their life where PTSD can be developed. Men are almost 2 times more likely to binge drink than women, and are 3 times likely to die as a consequence of alcohol abuse and other substance abuse, as men are more likely to have substance abuse issues. And 49% of men feel more depressed than they admit to the people in their lives. And there's also a statistic out there that says 40% of men won't talk about their mental health. And so with those statistics being said, I think it's important that we begin to prioritize, especially as men, begin to prioritize the conversation around men's mental health. And in my experience, because when it comes to talking about mental health, the only thing that I can talk about is my experience with my own mental health and the experiences and conversations that I have with other men around mental health. And that's a lot of the basis of a lot of things that I'll share with you in this video come from. But with those statistics, I think it's alarming in the fact that, as well, men are more likely to commit acts of violence, random acts of violence, as you see with homicides, mass shootings. And even in my home city, there was a mass shooting done by a 15-year-old male. And I think it's important that we address that and really look at it not so much as when those things happen, people begin to politicize them, but look at them as social and also a potential health crisis, especially that is becoming more and more prevalent post-pandemic, as a lot of us were isolated, and for some of us still feel a bit isolated. And I think, as I was reading in a book, or a summary of the book, The Art of War, about this idea of a warrior class of people, which are typically, young men. And I think in a society, it's important that we have healthy, functioning men to have a more healthy and prosperous society. So I think prioritizing men's mental health could benefit a lot of people and society and culture in general. So the first thing that I think, for me, in terms of my experience in talking about and trying to stimulate this conversation around men's mental health, for me, it's just my own experience with my own mental health. And so recently, I started going back to therapy. And a lot of times when I talk to guys about or bring up the idea about going to therapy, a lot of times, and I commend them, a lot of times I find that most men that I've spoken to, especially my age, have tried therapy. They maybe went to like 3 or 4 sessions and then they just stop. And when I always ask them why, they never really can give me a clear answer. And in my experience of going to therapy, I originally first started going to therapy as, depending on how long you've been a YouTube friend of mine, and I started essentially going after I lost my mother back in 2017. And I did the same thing. I went for a couple sessions on a monthly basis, and then I just kind of stopped. I just was like, oh, I feel fine. Like I'm doing better. But as time went on, that wasn't necessarily the case. And with that being said, I outside of just mental health, I plan on making a video subject around grief as now it's been 5 years since I lost my mom. I think that is an important topic to speak to that I feel a lot of people can relate, man or woman. But in the topic of men's mental health is, even for me in my experience, I thought I was fine. And I think as men, a lot of us are fueled by our pride and our ego and this idea that we have to do everything by ourselves. And I think a lot of us get trapped in our challenges that we're having. And I know a lot of guys, and I was one of those guys too, where it was like, as opposed to trying to talk to somebody about how I was feeling, it was just better for me to go to the gym or go work out or, find things that would distract me. And those help for sure. Those do help. But a lot of times the issues that we're dealing with are more complex. We're going to the gym or trying to do things that continuously stimulates our mind, body, and spirit sometimes doesn't always necessarily work, especially when you know that you're having some challenges and difficulties, and it almost becomes like quicksand, where the more you move or the more you try to overcome these difficulties, whether it's like negative thoughts, depression, and these sort of things, it almost kind of begins to swallow you, where you're only thinking about yourself and your issues and how you have to overcome them, and maybe how that's going to make you more of a man to say that I overcame these things without any help. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that, at least for me in my experience, that through understanding and recognizing that you're having some challenges, especially if it's mentally and emotionally, that idea of trying to do and be everything for yourself and on top of that for other people, it gets a little overwhelming at times, especially as we get older and we have more responsibility. I definitely think that gets more and more challenging. And in my experience, at least for me, and I'm pretty sure maybe some other men could agree, is that, you think, oh, I got this, I can handle this. But while you're saying that, you don't recognize how things are getting worse for you, such as, you can't focus at work, you're having a hard time maintaining your relationships, or you find yourself avoiding relationships. As I believe, and in my experience going back to therapy, just how much of unsettled emotions or emotions that we don't quite have the words to articulate how we're feeling causes us to avoid those things, to avoid those kinds of pains. And I think that becomes even more, we become more willing to do that, to play that game of avoidance, especially living here in America, where I believe, and through my traveling, if you've been a YouTube friend of me for a while, and watching my travel vlogs in the 17 countries that I've been to, I would say America's not perfect, but we do have a lot of luxuries here. I know Jordan Peterson uses this term from Pinocchio, Pleasure Island, where we almost have access to about anything and everything that could build us up but could also destroy us. So in the pursuit of trying to overcome these emotional and mental challenges on your own, and this is where probably the piece, I'm no therapist or psychologist, I'm just speaking to what I see and what I know and through my own experiences, is how easy it is to begin to self-medicate in all the wrong ways. And living in a place where things are so accessible, alcohol, drugs, sex, pornography, all these different things that I think men deal with. I think at some point every man is either going through those things or have been through those things, and if not yet, probably at some point may potentially go through those sort of things. And I find it funny when at least myself, when I begin to find a level of openness with other men that I don't quite know, because I would say that I am blessed that I have friends that I can be vulnerable with. There's been multiple times I've cried in front of my friends. I've shared very intimate information about myself with my friends, and I think it's important that every man has that support around them, and understand that you can't put that support into one person, because no one person can do that. It's important to have friends. It's important to maybe cultivate intimate and romantic relationships. I think it's important to cultivate relationships with older men, and even into the topic of connecting. As me being a younger man, even connecting with older men, sometimes I find it that the world that we live in comparison to the men of our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation, there's a lot of things that we deal with. I think because of technology and the way technology is so integrated into who we are, I think millennials and after, that some of the challenges they may not 100% be able to relate to. And even if they can, I find that sometimes they may feel that maybe because they didn't succeed in a certain part of their life, that they may feel that they have nothing to contribute. So to any older men that are watching that, that's not necessarily true. Even if you may not feel that you've made all the right decisions in your life when you're a young man, I do also believe that, sharing that information and failures and so forth can help a lot of young men. I'm only 29, and when I talk to young guys that are 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and letting them know some of the difficulties that I have, like for example, when it comes to like the male ego and pride, when I was younger, I would definitely say, and I'll be honest, like as a younger guy, one of the things that probably would have just saved a lot more headache is if also somebody told me the importance, even as a man, to preserve yourself and not always have to feel the need to chase women and do all these things, which can also sometimes be masking or a form of self-medication for a lot of men as well too. And speaking about other generations of men that have come before, millennials and thereafter, a lot of people say that it's our generation of men who don't have a war. We don't have like a central issue or overall threat to society that make men develop and have some sort of sense of purpose, such as going off to war like Vietnam or Korea or World War II or something like or some things of those natures. But in my opinion, I kind of disagree. I think the war that many men are fighting today are a mental one, an emotional one, a psychological one. And the silver lining in that is that I think this generation of men have an opportunity that other generations of men have not had, which is to have the freedoms and liberties to address these issues, to go to therapy, where nowadays going to therapy isn't something unusual. Men talking about their feelings and emotions, and also men, more importantly, talking about the things that they need from other people. As a piece of me, even growing up and becoming a young man, it's almost like the story that you get told is part of being a man is to sacrifice your own emotional and mental well-being or your own needs for some sort of higher purpose. Now, I do think that that can bring about a level of purpose, but only to an extent. I think there's pieces of everybody that we need as humans that need to be fulfilled in order for us to function. And that's why I think it's important as men, in terms of me actively pursuing and actively maintaining my own mental and emotional well-being, is looking for things that stimulate my mind, body, and spirit. And I think for every man, and I think that's why a lot of men gravitate to these personalities online, like Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, Hafiz from Roommates Podcast. And, these are some guys that I don't necessarily subscribe to all the things that they believe, or even this like red pill movement. I don't subscribe necessarily to all the things that a lot of these men or groups may say, but I tune in and listen, and I think a large following that they have, especially from young men, is because they're looking for some sort of guidance and really understanding, I guess, the pressures of what it means to be a man and so forth. And I think the luxury, again, that our society, that our generation of men has, is that we can kind of begin to redefine that. Like the other day, I was hanging out with some dudes. I mean, some of them had their fingernails painted. They just had their own swag to them. They the way they viewed, the way they articulated themselves. And, maybe back in the day that might have been looked down upon for a man to have his nails painted. But it's like we live in an era now where, like, it's okay. It's just, you can be yourself. And what part of being yourself is you have to be honest with yourself for your own personal well-being, to say when you need help. And that was something that I struggled with. Part of asking for help doesn't necessarily mean that you're weak. It just means that you've been strong for so long. And by getting the help you need, it can help you to continue to be the person that people love you for, and it allows you to continue to be the person and grow into the person that you want to be. Because, if you want to go fast, there's always the African proverb: if you want to go fast, you go alone, and if you want to go far, you need a team. So as men, I think it's important for our mental and emotional well-being to learn and to put ourselves out there and learn how to cultivate relationships with elderly people, other men, young men, romantic relationships as well, intimate relationships, learning how to be in all business relationships, learning how to be in these relationships, and learning how to communicate and articulate your feelings. Because I do think that a lot of men have been stunted in their emotional range. And part of the thing that I got out of going to therapy was that there were stories or feelings that I was articulating, and having somebody listen to them, they can put definitions and terms to how you feel, like resentment. Like I was articulating resentment, but I didn't know that that was resentment, or anger. I was articulating that I was angry, but I didn't know it was anger. Or a big one was loneliness, right? Because growing up, I always thought that being lonely was kind of like somebody who couldn't, talk to women, or couldn't cultivate relationships, had no friends. I thought like that's what it meant to be lonely. And that's not necessarily true. And I think a lot of us do feel lonely, and I think a lot of men are living lives of quiet desperation, especially when you hear men who take their own lives, and you just like, whoa, just like, or they die of overdose or something, or something catastrophic, where you'd be like, wow, and you just never know what people are dealing with. And so in my own personal pursuit of maintaining my own mental well-being, my own emotional well-being, as I wrap this video up, and I probably could even do a part 2 on this video, but as I wrap this video up, I always like to leave people with things that I think could help them, right? First and foremost, I would definitely say to the men out there and young men, I would say take a small step to finding and cultivating a relationship with somebody that you can be a little bit more open and vulnerable with. And if you don't have that luxury, that's where a therapist can come in handy, maybe even a life coach. But life coaches, as being a life coach myself, I know it's more something that's geared towards the future, from the present to the future, where therapy is a little bit more past and present to deal with your past issues, to make you more functional in the present, where coaching takes somebody who's functional in the present moment and makes them more optimal for their future. And therapy can do a little bit of that as well too. That's one thing that I would definitely say to do. And in my experience, I'm pretty sure if you've never been to therapy, probably your first couple of sessions will probably you just be talking and telling your story and letting things go. And that is the huge part of it. I think a lot of men go to therapy looking for some specific kind of result. They're having some sort of emotional challenge, so they feel that, well, going to as my therapist, you should solve these things for me. But I'm realizing, and Jordan Peterson said this, that knowing and being able to articulate what your problem or challenge is really half the battle. Because when it comes to certain things from my past that trigger me, it's not about getting rid of the triggers, it's about when they happen, how to manage them so you don't do things that jeopardize yourself and others. And so part of that, I do think, is finding somebody that you can be vulnerable with and share the most intimate parts of yourself with. Another thing is really understanding your mind, body, and spirit, and cultivating all three of those things. A lot of times, I was speaking on Clubhouse in this chat room that I would frequent, and one day I guess they just decided to make me a moderator. And I was talking, and it was something around spirituality, and one of the girls in there was talking about her boyfriend or husband or something like that, and some of the challenges that they were having, and some of the other men agreed with what she was saying in terms of how she was articulating whatever her significant other was going through. And I was saying that a lot of men, and this includes myself, and I've been working on this as I've gotten older, is that a lot of us, when it comes to problems, they stay in our head. We try to approach everything with logic and reason, which is okay, that works. But there's a whole other bag of tools that we can use as humans to help us to solve our issues and make them more sustainable and more beneficial to our overall well-being. And that is also listening to what your heart is telling you, right? Example, in terms of men's mental health, it could be this idea of feeling depressed because you don't feel like you are where you're supposed to be in life, especially in this era where we can consistently compare ourselves to our peers. And so logically, this problem stays in your head, and you never bring your heart or even your intuition, which is the other tool that you have, to help you solve these issues. So I think it's important to do things that stimulate your mind, do things that evoke positive emotions out of you, and also do things where you can, in a very healthy way, to let go of negative emotions, whether that be, going to the gym in a way, talking to somebody, going for walks, gardening, yoga. Guys are getting into yoga now. Whatever it may be. And understanding how to really cultivate that. And I think it's also important in this day and age where this new age form of spirituality, and I dibble and dabble in it as well, or even religion. I think it's important that every person, especially men, in the topic of men's mental health, cultivate their spirit. Find something that feeds their spirit, because it's your spirit that allows you to engage deeply with the world, to feel that sense of community, to feel that sense of oneness that makes you feel that even though you might look at the world and say, I'm just a small piece of a very large puzzle, but you begin to understand your importance and your importance in that puzzle. And I think the best representation of this theatrically is in the movie Avatar. That, if for those that have seen that movie, the little ponytail that they has like some sort of fiber optic ending, and they can attach this with animals, plants, and it kind of allows them to feel a certain kind of oneness. And that is what your spirit does for you. It allows you to love yourself more. It allows you to love other people more deeply. And then also, to add to that, I think it's also important in terms of also about being more vulnerable with people, is to let people know that when you're not okay. That was also very difficult for me to do, especially with people I know that care about me. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're having suicidal thoughts or anything like that, but it could just simply mean like you've been in a month and you just been in a funk, you can't seem to get anything to work right. And letting somebody know and allowing people to be there for you. That was a huge one for me. Realizing how many people were ready and available to be there for me. And that helped solve the little bit of a sense of loneliness and isolation that I'm pretty sure a lot of men feel. So the last pieces of resources that I think I could share in this video that might help some men or young men that are happen to watch this video and feel like what I'm saying is resonating are a few books, and also I'll give a link to a website as well too. But there's two books, especially if you're under the age of 18 and you're a young man, that really helped me to gain just a deeper perspective on life, even at a young age. It would definitely have to be The Alchemist by Pablo Coelho. Very interesting, fun book to read. Very easy read. Another one is one that my dad gave me when I was like 14. This was like the first book I ever read without it having to be a school assignment, and that's A Letter to a Young Brother, Manifest Your Destiny by Hill Harper. I think this is a great book for any teenage boy to read. Some more complex books is, I would have to say, Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning. And the core concept in this book is how to find meaning in life through enduring massive amounts of suffering. As Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor who was a psychotherapist and coined the term logos therapy, which is a therapy around a search for meaning, as he saw that many of his patients were suffering from many different neuroses such as anxiety and depression, because many had a lack of meaning to life, or either had a lack of meaning that they could apply to the reason behind potentially their sufferings in life. And so I think that this was a really key, pivotal book that really gave me a mental shift on dealing with tough situations and understanding that it's more important about your attitude and how you show up during those situations, and to use those situations as a tool, and these challenges and struggles as a tool, so that you can fulfill your own potential, that it's an opportunity for you to show who you really are. And Another book, this is a pretty interesting book. This was one that my grandfather recommended that I read. He mentioned it several times in our interview that I posted on my YouTube channel, and it's by Paul Tillich, The Courage to Be. It's about just simply existing and having the courage to do so. And in summary, his definition of the courage to be that I think every man who's searching for community could relate to is that it's about the definition for him in terms of what it means to have the courage to be. It is having the courage to be your own unique individual person, but yet also having the courage to be a part of a community. And for most men, sometimes that community finds you. Sometimes you have to build that community, as it's easier to do now with the internet. Or, you have to go out and look for it, and that may come with trial and error as well too. Another good book that helped me in terms of, again, my overall mental and emotional well-being is a book called The Way of the Superior Man. This book is by David Deida. I know it's a very interesting topic. I've heard some women hear this title and it sounds a little bit of a put off, but it's a very interesting book, and it really helped me to understand that what it like to be. It gave me a more holistic sense of what it potentially means to be a man, outside of just the stereotypical quote-unquote man's man, alpha male, that being a man is being a human, and to be a human means that you have emotions, you have all different aspects of you. And it was the first book in a very gentle way also touched on how to, as a masculine energy, show up in relationships as well too. And the last is not necessarily a book, but a philosophy. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, a well-known Stoic philosopher. And the reason I'm adding this book, or I guess I would say the topic of philosophy, is because, as I mentioned before, to live in the United States in this day and age, there's a lot of things that we have access to, a lot of things that, just a lot of pleasures. And I think more now so than ever, it's important that people begin to learn philosophy and how to manage and maneuver in a world of pleasures, pains, and so forth. And philosophy can help do that, especially Stoicism. And I guess I could say the last thing that I would say that has helped me, or a resource that I would encourage all men to look into, is psychologytoday.com, I think it is. And that is a website where you can find licensed therapists and counselors in your area. So I hope that if you're watching this video and you made it all the way to the end, I hope that there was something in this video that resonated with you. And as always, I hope that you like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, as I said, this video is to really start a continuous conversation around man's mental health and understanding the risk going forward of how not having these conversations can be risky, and understanding by having these conversations there's nothing that you can lose but so much to gain as a man that struggles with talking about their own emotions and mental well-being. And so with that being said, to start the conversation in the comment section below, I definitely like for you, and women, you can join in this as well too, and just share a little bit of maybe some of the challenges that you've had in maintaining your own mental health and well-being, and then also, more importantly, sharing how you might have overcome that, and share some of your wins and successes and some of your things that may have worked for you. And if you're somebody who is still struggling to learn how to overcome that, maybe take that first step in just admitting that and saying that you're struggling and you don't have all the answers, and nor should you have all the answers. And maybe that could be a gentle step towards getting the help that you need. So I hope that this video found you well, and as I wrap everything up, as always, peace.